All right. Well, as people are continuing to dial in, I will get started. So hello and welcome to the sixth SASI lunch break. Today we will be talking about the global combat against child labor in global agricultural supply chains. My name is Annette Chiruli-Harms. I'm from the Policy Institute for Consumer Policy, and it's a great pleasure to be with you here today to speak about this important topic. So while we did take a short break in May with these lunch breaks, obviously companies and we all can't take breaks from our due diligence obligations. So we are back with lots of content and on this important topic. We are speaking today about child labor also because we found it quite fitting, as you're going to hear in a second in the opening remarks by the BMZ, because on last Sunday, on June 1st, was the International Children's Day, and next week on June 12th is going to be the World Day Against Child Labor. So while basically any day of the year should be the World Day Against Child Labor, we found it quite fitting to put this session into this term of year. Child labor is always a delicate topic. It's an emotional one. It's unfortunately also an old topic, but nevertheless, it is ever more important. It stays important because investing into the children's future is also investing into our own future. So on today's agenda, as usual, we will have opening remarks by the BMZ, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And these will be followed by two fantastic speakers from the Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO, speaking about their work against child labor. So there's lots of content, but as usual, our meeting is recorded and you can also ask your questions via our chat function. So before we dive into the program, I would now like to welcome Lisa Kirfel-Rühle from the BMZ onto the stage for her opening remarks. Lisa.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm sometimes reopening these lunch breaks is a bit a one-way communication because I'm working with my small mobile phone and I would really love to see all all those people who take part. So I'm thrilled that I think there are 105 people in the call or registered. So it's really a mass movement. I would call it. It's really great. So I'm really happy and it's a great pleasure that I can welcome you today to the sixth SASI lunch break. Every first Friday of the month, our well-established and trusted format presents various practice-oriented tools and guidelines, and we demonstrate that the implementation of corporate due diligence is feasible for everyone. In less than a week, it will be the 12th of June, and this is the World Day Against Child Labor, a day that calls us to pause, reflect, and confront an uncomfortable truth, because still millions of children around the world are exploited and denied their fundamental rights. And it's not still, but it's sometimes we have to say, and it's really regrettable again and again, that it's not going down, that during COVID it was going up again. And this is why today's lunch break is so important to talk about this important topic to combat child labor along agriculture supply chains. And and we look in how far we can do this through digitalization. As part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the global community has committed to eliminating the worst forms of child labor by 2025, as set out in SDG 8. Well, this is this year. While we are awaiting a new report from the International Labour Organization concerning worldwide child labor statistics, I can confidently state without exaggeration, we will not reach this target this year. Although child labor has reduced from 246 million children in 2000 to 252 million in 2016, progress has stalled, with numbers rising to 160 million in 2020. As I already mentioned, with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the following economic crisis still to be evaluated. If we look in the regions, it depends on each region, an estimated 28 to 53% of child labor contributes to the production of exported goods and services. This highlights a significant link between child labor, global supply chains, and the products we consume daily. And this is why we set up the European Corporate Supply Chain Due Diligence Directive, and as well with regards to the European Deforestation Regulation, which can help here as well. We have set up frameworks to protect human rights and the environmental agenda along global supply chains. And this is also and still a priority for the new German government, and especially for our development policy. Now is the time to put the new legal framework into practice with pragmatic and innovative solutions. To this end, we are working together with our partners from business, civil society, academia, and politics. So it's the SASI idea here. We have the lunch break with. And what we exactly do is that in BMZ, we do actively support the development of practical, user-friendly digital solutions that can help translate due diligence requirements into actionable steps. So the SASI, within SASI, we do support the digital integration of agriculture supply chains, in short, DIASCA, most of you will heard of it, which is working on unique geo IDs and with WISP on a geolocation-based risk analysis in relation to deforestation. That's one important track. And at BMZ, we believe that lasting impact in global supply chains can be only achieved through strong international cooperation. That's why we work closely together with a wide range of partners, such as the FAO, with their DigiChild initiative. So I'm very excited for today's session and the valuable exchange of insights on this important topic. And lastly, I'd like to thank you in advance for your participation. Have a good day. And now back to the moderation to Annette.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for these opening remarks with good news and bad news and sort of much more work to do. So thank you very much, and all the best for you and the work you're doing. All right, so I think we will get on to the, let's go quickly towards the content from the Food and Agriculture Organization. I would like to welcome onto stage with me Ariane Janton from the FAO. Ariane holds degrees in international human rights law and worked at the International Labour Organization, so the ILO, before joining FAO in 2013. She has experience from countries affected by protracted crises and food insecurities, such as Niger, Mali, Lebanon, Pakistan, and Uganda. She has coordinated various projects geared towards the elimination of child labor in various subsectors and agri-food value chains. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Ariane. The floor is yours. We look very much forward to it.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I think we will start with our presentation. We know that you have little time at your disposal, but so today we are here indeed to talk about how to combat child labor through digitalization, and in particular to talk about an innovation that FAO has been implemented since last year, that is called the DigiChild initiative. You will now see the agenda proposed for this session. We will talk first about child labor in agriculture, to define what it is and what it is not, and how does it link to due diligence. This will be followed by Q&A session. Then my colleague Adriano will walk you through the FAO's DigiChild initiative on digitalizing child labor risk mapping along agri-food supply chain, and we will conclude again with a Q&A session. So child labor in agriculture, what is it and how does it link to due diligence? Well, what do we know about child labor and child labor in agriculture is that according to the latest estimates that were released by the ILO and UNICEF in 2021, and that will be indeed updated next week, the new global estimates will be released this coming Wednesday, the day before the World Day Against Child Labor in the context of the International Labour Conference, is that the trend is constant. And fortunately, agriculture has been over the last years, and it's likely to continue being the main sector of employment for children in child labor situation. And this links very much with FAO mandate, which is about addressing poverty, contribute to poverty reduction, and achieve zero hunger under the context, of course, of the SDG agenda. And so FAO has a responsibility to help address root causes linked with child labor, such as rural poverty and hunger. FAO works to mobilize agri-food system actors so that they can take a stand and be empowered to take action against child labor. In the context of the last global conference on child labor that was hosted by the government of South Africa and took place in 2022, the outcome document called Durban Call to Action placed the elimination of child labor in agriculture as top priority. The following global conference, those conferences are held every 4 years, will take place in Morocco in early 2026. FAO has a framework for its personnel worldwide and its partners on ending child labor in agriculture. FAO is also a founding member of the partnership called International Partnership for Cooperation on Child Labor in Agriculture. And it's a founding member along with the ILO, but you have also other member partners that are working more in rural development and agriculture, such as IFAD, IFPRI, but also IUF, which is a main trade union defending the rights of agricultural workers, and an observer, which is the Global March Against Child Labor. FAO is an active member of the Alliance 8.7, which has been formed to accelerate efforts against SDG 8.7, and we, of course, work in close collaboration with all over UN sister agencies that have complementary mandates with respect to child labor. So first of all, what is child labor actually? And sometimes it's a bit difficult to understand, but we are not talking about all the tasks undertaken by children in the context of agri-food value chain, and of agriculture in general. So there is a clear legal framework with conventions that have been quasi or universally ratified, and national legislation that exists in almost all countries, to understand what is child labor, what is the minimum age for employment for children, so any person below 18. Some guiding criteria that are quite clear is that child labor exists when tasks contribute to interfere with mandatory education. You have tasks that are not age appropriate according to national and international law. And it's when children are involved in work that is likely to harm their health, safety, or morals. So on the other hand, when you have children that are engaged in educational tasks, safe tasks, age-appropriate work that do not interfere with their education, this is not child labor. We will not talk about child labor. We will talk about children engagement in agricultural activities, children work. We can also use those terms, but we will not use the terminology child labor, which applies only to work that needs to be eliminated because not compliant with labor rights and human rights convention. So one of the main criteria is age, as we saw, no age-appropriate task. Here you have a timeline that help guide you about the kind of task that a child can undertake, depending on the age cohort that the child belongs to. So for 5-11 years old, a child can be involved only in safe educational tasks happening outside school hours, and always in the presence of an adult supervisioning the tasks, to make sure that they are undertaken safely. In some countries, you can have light work that is very clearly defined by the conventions, the ILO conventions pertaining to child labor, and it's work that in any event cannot be more than 14 hours per week, not during school hours and not at night. Very few countries at national level have adopted such a legislation. On the other hand, you have an important age cohort that is already considered youth according to many local and regional definition, but they are still children because they are below 18. And this age cohort is very often allowed to work full-time from 14, 15, 16, it depends from countries. And they can actually work legally full-time, provided that they are not involved in hazardous work. The issue with agricultural work, agricultural supply chain, is that many tasks remain hazardous there. Circumstances on age, and we will talk about it. From 18 onwards, it is full employment that is allowed, including hazardous work, and we talk about also youth employment, but without consideration of possible child labor. As I was saying, another important criteria is the hazardousness, not the level of risk and the type of hazards that a child is facing in the context of a work he or she is undertaking. And the convention are very clear that when we are facing a case of hazardous work, this should be classified as one of the worst forms of child labor. So we have an additional severity in those cases. And work can be hazardous by nature or by circumstances. By circumstances, to be brief, it means that you can do something about this task to make it safer. If it is work that is hazardous by nature, unfortunately, we cannot do much. A child cannot be involved in those type of tasks. And this kind of hazardous tasks by nature are defined at national level through dedicated legislative process. Well, now we come to the EU Directive on Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence. As you know, this directive has been adopted in a context where there has been a multiplication of market-based regulation that looked into human rights legalities and in general, human rights due diligence and accountability also of private sector within their operation. So companies should carry out due diligence process in the context of this directive to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for diverse and different and adverse human rights and environmental impact. Child labor is a human right. It belongs to the category of children's rights and core labor rights. The directive establishes a comprehensive process, non-comprehensive obligation for companies to ensure that in their operation and acting also with downward towards the supply chain, they comply with those standards that are social, human rights, and environmental protection standards. The rules apply to all companies. Actually, the directives say that there are different company types. Now, EU-based companies with more than 1,000 employees, you have some criteria in terms of turnover and also other conditions that apply. And for non-EU parent companies as well. So it will not apply to all companies. Micro companies and SMEs are not covered by the proposed rule. No, but there is the directive provides supporting and protective measures for SMEs, which could be nonetheless indirectly affected by the directive, no, as partners in value chain. So this is the current legal framework of the directive. How will the rules be informed? There is a civil liability where member states will ensure that victims get compensation for damages resulting from unintended failure to carry out due diligence, and the public sections will be available for last 5 years at least. And there are also administrative sanctions and fine that are foreseen and they should be dissuasive, proportionate, and effective. Those are the criteria, and they can include fines up to 5% of a company's net worldwide turnover. The timeline of adoption, as you know, it has been a bit, let's say, difficult to foresee. There have been some changes, and it has been a directive highly discussed with a 2024-2026 integration of a directive into national legislation. The directive should be applicable at national level from 2026-2027, and from 2027 there should be a mandatory compliance now for companies with more than 5,000 employees and annual net turnover of more than 1.5 million. Then mandatory compliance from 2028 for companies with a lower number of turnover, net turnover, and employees, and so on for 2029. So how to comply with the directive? There are some potential actions such as mapping supply chain, adapt corporate policies and code of conduct, strengthen comprehensive complaints and reporting procedures, or record and document novel sustainability efforts, decisions, and action, including to address child labor. So this is it from my side. I thank you for the first part of this presentation, and over to you, Annette. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ariane. That was very, very helpful and very insightful. So stay with us, stay here. We have some questions to you, and they're already starting to come in. So yes, let's take some questions from the audience. Someone's writing, spraying pesticides or herbicides is hazardous work, but according to your slide, this is considered worse than worst forms of child labor that include sexual exploitation and trafficking. Can you please explain the logic behind this?
So thank you very much for these questions. No, actually, hazardous work is at the same level as sexual exploitation and trafficking in the conventions. No, it is considered one of the 4 worst forms of child labor, hazardous work. So at the same level as sexual exploitation and trafficking. So in the context of agriculture and agri-food system, agricultural supply chains, the most disseminated worst form of child labor is hazardous work. And indeed, spraying pesticides, applying herbicides is considered in most national legislation as hazardous work per nature in a local legislation. So I hope this clarifies. Thank you.
Thank you, certainly. And also, I think the definitions that you presented, really sort of understanding what is and what isn't child labor, are very, very helpful to sort of contextualize and also take away some of the fear that companies are facing. Sort of any presence of children must certainly be illegal, but that's not actually. We're talking about very specific forms of child labor, which are regulated and forbidden. So maybe just because we had to rush you a little bit at the end of your presentation, speaking about the CSDDD, how do you think it contributes to addressing child labor along agri-food supply chains? And do you think it will be a challenge for companies, sort of that specific aspect for child labor?
Thank you. So I think that to reflect a bit the introductory remarks, we are indeed, unfortunately, very far from reaching the target of SDG 8.7 and to eliminate all forms of child labor by 2025. Of course, we all await with anxiety the release of the new global estimates, but one can legitimately expect that they will not show us, unfortunately, the elimination of all forms of child labor. And so there are the directive has the merit to contribute to try to propose a legislative measure that can, let's say, incentivize companies to take action where it is in their realm of action to support the elimination of child labor. And of course, this will require additional efforts from companies, but the directive also foresees to target first those companies that have more means, let's put it like that, because they deliberately target first companies that have more employees, that have more net turnover, so in theory, that have more capacity also to identify child labor within their operation and to adopt related mitigating measures. So for sure, this will require additional efforts in terms of application of mitigation measures that are relevant and that allow sufficient outreach in terms of lower tier of production that is at times the most difficult tier of production to monitor in agri-food value chain. But there have been already some very valuable efforts actually implemented by companies. So yes, that certainly will not be an easy path, but the directive can be seen as a positive step in the right direction. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Ariane, there are more questions posed to you. We will take them at the very end of the session. I think it's now important that we get to the second part of the content, and maybe some questions are going to be answered. So thank you very much. We will see you in a short while. And I would now welcome your colleague, Adriano Bolchini, to the stage with me. He is also from the FAO. Adriano has degrees in public affairs and European studies, and he's similarly to Ariane, he has also worked at ILO prior to joining FAO in 2020. He has also extensive experience on the ground, but he co-leads currently FAO's DigiChild initiative on upscaling child labor risk assessments, which he is now going to tell us all about. Adriano, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annette, and very good to be with you here today. Good morning, everyone. So here's the presentation. I will take control of it and let me know in case you cannot see it. So DigiChild. DigiChild is half of an acronym. It stands for Digital Geographic Information for Child Labor Risk Estimation. And let's together unveil this acronym and its meaning. So, as we have mentioned, at the core of FAO's work on child labor in agriculture, there is the sectorial prevalence of child labor, the majority of which is still in agriculture. And right now, there is an increasing need to accelerate efforts because of increasing and emerging due diligence obligations. However, there is a long-standing problems when it comes to addressing child labor. And the problem is that data on child labor, especially in agriculture, is really limited. And without adequate data, the ministries of labor, for example, mandated ministries, cannot target high-risk areas. At the same time, ministries of agriculture cannot ensure the long-term sustainability of agri-food systems and value chains. From the private sector side, it is really complicated for companies to improve transparency, traceability along their supply chains, and therefore complying with due diligence obligations. And lastly, for development partners and also financial institutions, it's really difficult to strengthen their safeguard system when it comes to social standards. And that is why, since 2021, actually, we have worked with Wageningen University in the Netherlands to publish, to develop a paper called Digitalization and Child Labor in Agriculture, exploring the potential of digital tools like geographic information system to address this problem. And one of the main conclusions of the paper was that direct observation remains the most accurate way of collecting data on child labor. However, digital tools like GIS can complement, and we're not talking about duplicating nor replacing, traditional child labor monitoring system based only on direct observation. But why do we need to complement direct observation? Because despite being the most accurate way of data collection on child labor, it still presents some long-standing challenges. Direct observation is costly, often leaving little resources for actual remediation. It is time inefficient. We know that child labor surveys at the national, regional, global level, they're often released every 4, 5, sometimes 10 years. And it's really, really difficult to take action upon this frequency. Direct observation cannot ensure a very high territorial coverage because often you have a limited number of labor inspectorates for a whole of a country. And at the same time, and that is why, in child labor surveys at the national level, you often have low granularity data, meaning admin 1 level data mostly. And so it's really difficult to understand what is happening at the local level. In some countries, we have observed several child labor monitoring systems that do not talk to each other. And so for governments, it's really difficult to ensure interoperability among these systems and know what data to rely on. And direct observation cannot forecast child labor risk. It can give you a picture of what is happening now, but the early action capacity of direct observation is limited. And that is why, as FAO, we work on addressing the root causes of child labor in agriculture, and we realized that several of these root causes are already being collected and captured through a remote sensing system. And that is why we thought about producing a composite index called DigiChild. It's a child labor risk estimation index based on GIS. And we underline risk estimation because DigiChild does not tell you where child labor actually is. It gives you an estimation of a risk that a given rural community is exposed to a wide set of drivers, typical drivers of child labor in agriculture. And it's a composite index because it combines existing geographical information on selected risk indicators. And here we underline existing because DigiChild does not collect any new data. It just combines already existing information based on GIS, allowing us to map rural communities exposed to a higher risk of child labor and to understand why. What is the cause? Is it because schools are too distant? Is it because food insecurity levels are high? Is it because climate vulnerability shows high levels? And it's being piloted in FAO's hand-in-hand geospatial platform for 2 countries for now. We have piloted DigiChild in Honduras and Uganda because both of them are hand-in-hand member countries, are Alliance 8.7 Pathfinder countries, and are also countries benefiting from an EU-funded Clear Supply Chains project co-implemented by FAO on ending child labor in supply chains. And we have done that through a solid participatory approach. In 8 months of implementation, so a really short time frame, we organized 3 consultations in Honduras, 3 consultations in Uganda, and 1 consultation at the global level, because we really wanted to make sure to engage key national actors from day one, to develop the tool together with them and for them, because this would have allowed and has allowed national buy-in and endorsement at the end of the pilot phase. What is the impact that we want to have with DigiChild? Well, we want to provide public and private decision makers with child labor risk data that address some of the challenges that we have seen before of direct observation, meaning data that are more cost effective, time efficient, because DigiChild aims to be updated on a quasi-real-time basis, have higher granularity. DigiChild has a granularity of 1 square kilometer, higher territorial coverage, because by nature, satellite imagery can cover the whole of a country, and then forecasting capacity, because as we will see, DigiChild aims to be an early action tool to foresee where higher risk of child labor is and take preventive measures. Therefore, the ultimate aim is to inform tailored and timely policies and programs of mandated ministries to end child labor in agri-food systems, shifting the typical approach on remediation to prevention. And as we know, this is also cost effective. From the private sector side, we would like DigiChild to support companies to increase their transparency, traceability along the supply chains, and therefore showing compliance with due diligence legislation. DigiChild can also inform national surveys. It does not substitute or replace them, but it informs the budget allocation of their data collection efforts. And for development partners and financial institutions, it can help them strengthening their safeguard systems. This is just to give you an idea of the timeline that we followed from July last year to February this year. 6 or 7 consultations in total, 6 at the country level and 1 at the global level, which were instrumental to select the risk indicators, most relevant risk indicators for the country, to standardize them and to weight them, because not each risk indicator has the same impact on child labor risk estimation. And on the selection of risk indicators, this is the end result for Uganda. Together with the national partners, we have identified 8 dimensions of risk, and for each dimension, we have identified several variables. So poverty and food insecurity for livelihoods, school proximity, density for school accessibility, school dropout rates, some climate risk like droughts, heat stress, precipitation, many proxies on demography, so child marriages, teenage pregnancies, water accessibility, which has a strong gender component, infrastructure and conflict. And for every variable, we needed to identify the best source of data. And by best, we mean the source of data with the highest spatial resolution and the highest temporal resolution, because the higher the granularity of the data source, the higher the granularity of the index. The higher the frequency of the source, the higher the frequency of the index. So we really needed to make this important effort with country-level partners. And in Honduras, it follows more or less the same narrative with some data sets that changed. For example, we managed to capture more demographic data for Honduras. And as you see, it's a mix of survey data and GIS-based data with a slight preference of the latter. But once selected, we needed to weight them. And we did this through a budget allocation survey. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, but we asked all the more or less 120 participants to allocate a budget of 100 to the different dimensions of risk based on what they thought was the impact of each dimension of risk on child labor risk estimation. We combined them and we developed some prototype maps. And this is the prototype map that we generated and validated with Uganda stakeholders. And you can already understand how the visual component of DigiChild is one of his strengths. Because for an external user, it's pretty friendly because you immediately understand how it works. You have the colors associated to higher and lower risk. And it has a granularity of 1 square kilometer. So the user can really zoom in to the rural area in which she or he is interested in, and understand not only the child labor risk value, but also what are the most prevalent root causes in that specific area. And at the bottom right-hand side, you can see the different risk dimensions weighted as per the consultations. We did a validation exercise during the consultation with the national map coming out from the national survey based on direct observation. And you can see that we are going in the right direction, but you can also see the immediate advantages of a GIS-based map in terms of granularity, because it really can go deeper in the rural area, and also in terms of understanding what are the most prevalent root causes behind a single value. And this is how it looks like in FAO's hand-in-hand platform with the risk estimation value that appears in the gray table. And an additional feature that we added is we asked the participants to the consultations, is there a specific commodity that you would like us to integrate in DigiChild? And in Uganda, they said coffee, sugarcane, and livestock, because these, for them, were commodities of strategic importance. And therefore, we added these commodity masks, which are specifically interesting for actors working in a specific commodity or sector, because it can see what is the child labor risk estimation and the relative drivers in a specific areas where the company or the entity sources its commodity from. We did the same exercise in Honduras with the general map that follows the same narrative, the validation process. This is how it looks like in FAO's platform. And in Honduras, they told us about coffee, cocoa, and basic grains, so beans and corn, but we were only able to extract georeference data for cocoa, because we can put whatever information we want in DigiChild. The important thing is that we have georeference data for that commodity. And this is the message we conveyed, and this is the part of a follow-up work that we're doing with the countries to generate georeference data for the commodities they are interested in, so that we can integrate them in DigiChild. So for now, I will stop here just to leave some time for Q&A in case you have questions, and also I will leave it there when it comes to the next step as well. Thank you very much. Over to you, Annette.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adriano. I think this was very clear and very powerful indeed, as you sort of explain how the data comes together and then the visual impact of it. So yes, now is the time for questions to both our speakers. I would also like to welcome Ariane back. There have already been several questions asked to her, but maybe let's stick to what is freshly on our mind, Adriano. The first question in the chat comes to you, just repeating, is the data publicly available? And also, is the tool publicly available maybe? Can you say something to that?
Sure, thank you, Francisca. So as a UN agency, what we produce is normally, we want to produce it publicly available, no? In this case, it applies as well to DigiChild. DigiChild aims to be publicly available on FAO's hand-in-hand platform, and we are waiting for the final green light from both ministries of labor and agriculture, respectively, from Uganda and Honduras, to be able to safely and surely publish that information. And the two governments also expressed interest in hosting DigiChild in their websites. So to really realize a buy-in, a concrete ownership of the tool through their website. So the short answer is yes, it will be available in a very short time, as soon as we have the green light from both governments. Over.
And staying on data, which databases do you use and how do you build the maps and how do you update the data?
Thank you. This is also a very core question, and it takes some time, but what you saw in those colorful tables that we've shown, for each proxy of risk, for each variable of risk, we have identified a source of data, no? And these sources of data for the 15 to 20 variables of risk are both GIS-based datasets and survey data. And for GIS-based datasets, for example, climate is one good example of it, because for drought, we have used agriculture stress index. For heat stress, we have used Earth map. For flooding, we have used CHIRPS. And OpenStreetMap was another good one for georeference data for school density, for water fetching points. And beside that, survey data, the main ones we have used are the Living Standard Measurement Study from the World Bank for demographic risk indicators, and also MIX survey on which we have collaborated with UNICEF for demographic data in Honduras. So it is a mix of the two, but when we share the PowerPoint, I think you will have the whole list. And for the sustainability, no, for the update, this is part of the sustainability strategy of DigiChild, where in both countries, the governments have expressed interest to host in the ministries some sustainability task force of DigiChild, gathering all the key partners behind DigiChild, especially the data owners, so that whenever there's an update in a data set feeding DigiChild, we can reflect that update in the index itself. And in a first phase, it should be manual, so through coordination at the country level between stakeholders. But the ideal scenario in the future would be to leverage the potential of machine learning to have it automatically updated. But we're still not there. And but the idea really for DigiChild is to be updated on a quasi real-time basis, because this is one of the comparative advantage when it comes to data collection mechanisms on child labor. Of
Very
course,
clear.
Ariane,
So-
come in if you want to complement on any point.
Great. So yeah, just following up a bit further, because there's great interest in the tool. I think people also in the audience find it clearly useful. Is it going to be rolled out in other countries? And is there any
That's our,
timeline for that?
That's our that's our desire, no? And that's what we're working on right now, to seek opportunities to adapt the tool to other countries and supply chains. Just to clarify, DigiChild is a global tool with a global methodological framework. This global methodological framework can be adapted to different countries. But since we want this to be as accurate as possible for a country, that is why for us it's really important to adopt this participatory approach, engaging them since the very first day, of the adaptation. So the answer is yes, it's possible to adapt the global methodology to individual countries where interest and opportunities arise. But this is the intention, yes. Over.
Great. So maybe just asking one more question to Ariane that came before. It said something about your slide where you mentioned different types of child labor and that not all of them were sort of labeled as child labor. Could you just give a couple of examples sort of on what specifically is and isn't child labor according to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. To be very practical, like if you have a very young child, no, because we talk about different criteria to define what is child labor and what is not child labor. And one of the criteria, for example, for the youngest age cohort, so children like of 5, 6, up to 11 years old, we said only safe educational task. A typical safe educational task is feeding chickens, feeding pigs. Which is a very short task and simple task, and you go, you see the animals. It can be also outside school hours for maybe slightly older child, so like we're talking more of 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, to accompany the mother to the market and help sell the surplus production. When we are talking about subsistence farming, no? Those are the kind of tasks that I can think of right now on the top of my head related to crop farming. Yes, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And yes, there's several more questions on the DigiChild tool. If one was on the granularity of the data, I think you mentioned, Adriano, that it was around 1 square kilometer that the data is precise to. And so can you zoom into the data to then also see the specific factors that led to the rating per square kilometer? Is that correct?
Absolutely. The idea is really that you can click on a GPS point, and for that square kilometer, a gray table would appear, and you're able to see to easily make a multi-criteria analysis, because you see all the variables of the dimensions of risk, and per dimension of risk you see the risk value for that GPS point. So you're able to understand whether, for example, the problem in that square kilometer is that schools are too distant, or maybe sources are too distant, or it's a high conflict area, or it's an area vulnerable to drought or heat stress. And so you can tailor your intervention in that sense.
Brilliant. Yes, very useful. And just once again, all the slides with also some additional material will be shared with you via the SASI website afterwards, so you can read up in that and also ask questions. Now there've been sort of two questions, I think one to each of you regarding the relationship of your work to other frameworks. Ariane, can you explain if and how the IPCCLA or the FAO work relates to the ILO child labor platform?
Sure, absolutely. So indeed, the partnership now, but in our jargon, we called IPCLA. We founded it with ILO back in 2007. So yeah, in 2007. So the relationship with ILO has been a long-standing one of really close collaboration. And FAO in general has been implementing several projects jointly with ILO. Now there is a current project under implementation that is called Clear Supply Chains project that is aimed at targeting in particular child labor in the coffee supply chains, and it targets indeed Uganda and Honduras mostly. There is also a global component, and there are other partners like UNICEF and the International Trade Center. This is a project funded by the European Union, where indeed the CLP is used now, the child labor platform, and their members is used indeed as an instrument to upscale our efforts to address child labor in both countries and to really work in collaboration with companies that are member of CLP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think this one goes to you again, Adriano. Is there any point of contact with the MIRTI tool? And also, do you know that tool from ILO? And which are the improvements from DG Child?
Absolutely. So colleagues from the MIRTI initiative, they were part of the consultations behind DigiChild, and they provided useful feedback on how the two initiatives could complement each other. I mean, the main points of differences are that DigiChild, unlike MIRTI, focuses really on agri-food sector and agri-food supply chains. It has a strong component on GIS. So it's not really only on admin level data. And Honduras, one of the two pilot countries of DigiChild, was not covered at the time by MIRTI. So there are some differences, but for sure the two tools can be complementary, and MIRTI colleagues will continue to be consulted when upscaling, hopefully, DigiChild. And the second one, margins for improvement of are absolutely possible improvements. This was a prototype. When it comes to actually in this pilot phase, we only had limited time and limited resources. So we had to choose on what aspects to prioritize in the development of DigiChild. But there are some margins of improvement on which we would like to work on if we find the opportunity. For example, on the weighting of the risk indicators, running a linear regression to reduce the subjectivity behind the budget allocation process would be something that, in our view, would really enhance the accuracy of the tool. Or, for example, generating georeference data for given commodities. And really increase the wide range of crops that you see in DigiChild. These are only two examples, but the tool is a prototype that can be improved. Over.
Great. Yes, there continue to be questions around scaling the tool up to other areas, but also then dealing with sort of the scale of things. Can you say anything about the risk levels? How do they compare from one country to the other? There's been the comment that the Honduras map showed significantly more high-risk areas compared to Uganda. Is this sort of, do you have similar thresholds across different countries, or do you deal with these similarly? We now need to unfortunately be very short with our answers, but please try.
I mean, and Ariane, feel free to complement, but DigiChild does not aim to compare between countries. It's not a comparative tool. Why? Because we are working to really make it as tailored as possible to the country. So when adapting it to a country, the country may choose different risk indicators, slightly different. And especially the weighting process would be different, because the countries would say in Uganda, school proximity has a higher impact on child labor risk compared to Honduras and relative to other risk indicators. So you would have an algorithm that is different from country to country. So it's not thought to compare, to make comparison, but for really supporting the country to take tailored measures. I don't know, Ariane, if you want to complement.
I see. Maybe just, yes, Ariane, do you want to complement?
Thank you. No, I saw the other question about the selection of child labor indicators, so maybe I can start on this one.
This one, they say that it's been answered, so I don't think we have to answer that final one.
Perfect.
So then maybe just in sort of a 20-second or 30-second max wrap up, just given, I mean, you don't say it's, you say it's a risk area, the specific labeled area on the map has a risk for having child labor present. It's not a proof that it is present. So given that a company sees the map and sees they're operating in a high risk area, what actions should they do?
Okay, so yeah, like Adriano explained now on the GPS points, when you click on it on the map, you're able to select the different, to see the different risk indicators now and the level of risk in each GPS point. So like if you want to select a red GPS point, you will see why this point is red, basically. And so for the company, at least it would give really very important information, because if they know that this is influenced by climate risk, non-climate related risk, or demographic risk, or risk related with poverty, livelihoods, food insecurity, you can tailor your mitigation measures and invest efforts where it's worthwhile. No, because child labor is really a complex failure of development in venue. There is not one reason behind why children are sent to work by their families. And so you need to take that into account. There is a fairly robust literature now that goes back to at least 2 decades documenting why there is child labor and what are the main drivers, let's say, behind it. But as Adriano was explaining, DigiChild reflects that diversity from country to country. So you will find in most countries those same patterns, those same drivers, but those drivers have a different influence over the decision of families to send or not their children to work. And it depends also a little bit on the, let's call it the value chain of agricultural subsectors. Now that weight also might differ a little bit. So yes, this is a principle of answer, at least. Thank you.
Great. I think we could keep on talking. It was really, really interesting, very useful tool. I hope you get the funding and the resources that you need to develop it further. But for now, thank you both, Adriana and Ariane, for joining us today. I would now like to hand over to the closing remarks to Moritz Helpmann from the SASI and an outlook to next edition. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much, Annette, and thanks above all to Ariane Gonton and Adriano Bolcini for your valuable input today. It was really inspiring to learn about the high potential of digitalization in combating child labor in agricultural supply chains, especially through georeferenced data. Your insights, together with the practical examples of the DigiChild tool, have provided us with valuable perspectives and deepened also our understanding of how digital approaches can help to tackle both the challenges and leverage the opportunities of implementing due diligence in agricultural supply chains. On behalf of the SASI team, I would like to extend my thanks to you as speakers and also to all the participants for their valuable contributions. It has been really an insightful exchange on how to put innovative digital tools into practice along agricultural supply chains. For any further questions and information, please reach out to our SASI team anytime via our website or LinkedIn, and sign up for our monthly newsletter to be informed about events, studies, and our funding opportunities as well for more sustainability in agricultural supply chains. Last but not least, I do hereby invite you to join our next SASI lunch break, which will take place on Friday, July 4th. and we will share the topic of this lunch break very soon via our communication channels. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your Friday.